And with that, I'd like to introduce Steve Frank, who is the, and Jan just took off, it looks like, who is the chief editor of CaliforniaPoliticalReview.com. Make sure that you sign up there, capoliticalreview.com. And he has been doing this for over 20 years. He is our favorite pundit. He can tell you everything. He broke the news to us last time about who's running in the race, Caitlyn Jenner. I was wondering if she's actually going to be the first female governor that we'll have here in the state. And with that, I'd like to introduce Steve.
Well, thank you very much, Wendy. I'm glad that you're going to have my good friend Gina Gleason speak to you. And Jan, you mentioned a lot of things that Gina has done. You left out something that is extremely important that she did. In the 2020 election, she, through Calvary Chapel, harvested 12,500 ballots, votes for young Kim for Congress. Were it not for Gina Gleason, young Kim would not be in Congress. And so that's just one of her specialties, is getting out the vote, and in the new world of doing the harvesting of the votes. This is a new world. And I could talk to you. Let me just tell you that on Monday or Tuesday, I have an op-ed piece I just finished writing just before this, called "Wimps for Jenner, for Caitlyn Jenner for governor," and it goes through the background of Jenner through the show, The Kardashians. Now, most of you know me. You've heard me before. I don't know that I've ever mentioned that I have watched every single episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians. So I know everything there is, more than I want to, about the Kardashian clan. And when you watch the show, when Bruce Jenner was on it, it was a show that was showed him to be a cartoon character, a buffoon. His daughters would and his wife would force him to do things he didn't want to do. He couldn't stand his ground. He was the biggest wimp you could ever imagine. And he did this on national TV. And how bad of a candidate for governor is Jenner? In my article, I have quotes from his sons who call him an embarrassment, and his daughters refuse to support him. Those who know him best say no to Caitlyn Jenner for governor, and that should give you an idea. Now, normally I talk about the issues of bill here or bill there in Sacramento that's going on. I'd like to talk about something more universal than that, something that's going to affect all of us over the next few months, and we're beginning to see the effect now. In the past year, the cost of corn has gone up 146%. The cost of lumber has gone up over 260%. In Los Angeles, the cost of gas in the last year has gone up $1.20 a gallon. I was up in King City earlier this week, up in Monterey, and I bought gas, and I was very happy to do it at $4.05 a gallon. And I had bought gas in Avila Beach a few days prior to that at $4.19 a gallon. And I was talking to a friend in the Sacramento area yesterday, and they have a gas station where gas is over $5 a gallon. The cost of food is going up. The cost of transportation is going up. And as the cost of gas goes up, the cost of transporting goods around the country, whether it be food goods or appliances or stuff, that goes up because the cost of transportation is going up. You may have noticed that Joe Biden predicted 1 million new jobs for the month of April. Instead, we got 266,000 new jobs. It is the worst mistake historically of the federal government in predicting jobs, and Joe Biden can be proud of the fact this is another one of his failures. But the reason is the cost of labor is going up because there is a shortage of labor. Now, you would think with a pandemic and with a 6.1% unemployment rate, that there'd be plenty of people for jobs. But with the so-called stimulus packages paying people more not to work, why would anybody want to work? I had an opportunity yesterday of driving from Simi Valley down to Palos Verdes near San Pedro, and at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was just a terrible drive. Who would want to be in that type of a mess? Took me almost 3 hours to get there, and I left at 9 o'clock coming back, and it took me only 1 hour to get home. That'll give you an idea how bad traffic is in the Los Angeles area. But inflation is going to hit us. It's going to hit us hard. And even the Secretary of the Treasury, Yellen, says that, well, we don't really have much of a problem, but we could handle it. And we are going to have a slight blip in the inflation rate. Well, inflation is going to destroy the cost of housing, foodstuff, transportation, etc. People won't get jobs. The good news, of course, is more and more people are working from home. That will save some money. But the reality is businesses aren't going to be hiring. And the April jobs report, when they expected 1 million jobs and they only got 266,000, says that inflation is going to be a serious problem. And as we go through the $6 trillion that Joe Biden has on the table for us to spend for infrastructure, for Planned Parenthood, for social equity, for discrimination, for the federal government to take over a lot of what the states and the local communities do, we are in deep trouble. The good news is this morning, because of the inflation that's hitting us, the lack of jobs that is hitting us, some of the closest people to Pelosi in Washington are now saying, well, you know what? We may not be able to pass the socialist agenda. The important phrase there is they admit it's a socialist agenda. We are in the middle of what I would call a cultural revolution. And it is similar, and I'm doing a story about this, it's similar to the Cultural Revolution between the 30s and the 60s in Red China, where the state surveilled everybody, told people what they could learn and what they can't learn, what jobs they could have, who was important and who isn't, putting people in concentration camps. They called them indoctrination camps. We're doing the same. At the same time, here in California, I hope everybody on this call is a strong, active supporter of the Second Amendment, because the governor has announced that he's going to release at least 50,000 more prisoners from the state prison, including about 20,000 prisoners who were sentenced to life without parole. On top of that, the Los Angeles District Attorney, George Gascon, owned by George Soros, has announced that if a criminal applies for parole, his office is going to support it. Carte blanche, just across the board, no questions asked. Every criminal deserves parole immediately because they've made up for their mistakes, according to him. So you have illegal aliens flooding our country. You have the importation of illegal aliens, criminals. You have major cities getting rid of their gang task force and human sexual trafficking task force. You have the inability of judges to sentence people who steal $950 or less in a single incident. So you could do 4 or 5 thefts in a day worth about $4,000. And the worse you get is a traffic ticket, which you ignore. And so on top of the inflation that we're going to be facing, we are going to be facing a very lawless California. And that's going to be a real problem. One of the things Gavin Newsom is doing is changing the sentences of illegal aliens from felonies to misdemeanors as quickly as he can for the purpose of making sure they can't be deported. If they have a felony on their record, they can be deported. If it's a misdemeanor, they can't be deported, which is another problem. But the governor is working hand in fist with the illegal immigration community to make sure as many can stay here as possible. So what does that mean? Zero Hedge, which is a great newsletter, just came out with a story showing how the middle class and the poor are the ones that are fleeing California. The only people coming into California, besides the illegal aliens, are the very rich. And they're doing it because they love the weather, they love the atmosphere of California, and they can afford it. But if the middle class flees and the poor flee, who's going to do the work? Oh, illegal aliens. So on top of the inflation, you have this problem. Then let's compound this because we're talking about inflation. I'm sure most of you have seen your water bills. Not only the water bills going up dramatically throughout the state, but we're shortly, within a month, in most parts of Northern California and some parts of the South, you're going to find that your water is being rationed. I believe it's Marin County, but don't hold me to that, but one of those counties near Marin, and it may be Marin, has already announced that they're going to ration water starting in June. So we're not going to have water. We know that we have brownouts and blackouts. We have inflation. We have crime growing in the state. We are in a state of chaos in California. Beyond being, and you talked about the recall a little bit before, and the reality is the national media is calling the recall a circus. And it doesn't help when one of the candidates brings a 1,000-pound Kodiak bear to all of his events. And by the way, a friend of mine noticed yesterday, why a Kodiak bear? That's not even a California bear. He should have had a California bear with him instead of an Alaskan bear. And then you have Caitlyn Jenner. And then you have all these people running around the state with all sorts of issues. We still have two main candidates, John Cox and Kevin Faulconer. And of course, the media is trying to get John Cox to drop out in favor of Faulconer. And if I was doing a comparative, which I am, of Faulconer and Newsom, I can't find any difference in policy between the two of them. The only difference is one's just a Hollywood slickie, and the other is just a socialist from San Diego. And so we're going to be in for a really tough time here in California over the next several months between water shortages, which the governor's doing nothing about, hasn't done anything about. Democrats have known about this problem for years, and Jerry Brown refused to allow the building of new dams or the expansion of dams. Up north, there's a dam called Lake Shasta. The federal government under Trump was willing to expand that dam by 100 feet. That's a massive expansion with all the cost going to the federal government. Wouldn't have cost the state of California anything. And what did the Democrats do? They sued the Trump administration to stop the expansion of the dam on environmental grounds, even though we're going into a drought situation. They knew we were in a drought situation. Over the past 5 years, it's been getting worse every year, and this year is going to be terrible. So what happens when you have a drought and you don't have the water and you have hot weather? They're already talking about the fire season. This is a great story. If I was doing a TV show that's episodic and I was doing week after week, The Crises of California would be the name of the show. Inflation, no water, no energy, criminals all over the place. Cops afraid to arrest criminals because if they do, the cops are in trouble for either violating their rights or being a racist because a white cop arrested a black criminal, or a black cop arrested a Hispanic criminal. It's all racist. Then, of course, I could talk about the failure of our schools. My good friend, and I think your good friend, Tom Del Beccaro, when he introduces me at groups, he calls me Dr. Doom and Gloom. And now you could see why. Because as Harry Truman said, I don't give them hell. I just tell the truth and they think it's hell. And the problem is Californians are not willing to face the facts that we're living in a hell, a cultural hell, an economic hell, an education hell, a healthcare hell. We're living in a state that doesn't respect its citizens and doesn't respect the rights of business owners. I think I forgot to mention that in the last year, 35.9% of California small businesses have closed permanently. That's how bad it is. We are in a chaotic disaster led by the Democrats. And I know that we want to have the recall be successful. I expect it to be successful, but that doesn't mean our problems are solved. The best way to solve that problem is what I call recall mania. We need to recall people one at a time. Now, the petition that Jan was speaking about on MoveOn.org against State Senator Pan, Dr. Pan, is a nice thing to do, but it's worthless. Unless you have a legal petition, you're just making people feel good that they've signed that petition without any real action. And it's about time that we stop feeling good and start doing the hard work of fixing the state. And so that'll give you just an idea as to where we are today in California. Actually, I'm very optimistic about the future. I think that these things are going to get so bad by the end of the summer, people will revolt, which is why I believe the Newsom recall is going to be successful. And we have the ability to make a difference by doing that. But people are going to hurt and hurt bad in the state of California, thanks to the Democrat policies, both in Sacramento and in Washington. So that'll give you an idea of where we are. I'd be very happy, Wendy, to open up for any and all questions. I know there's a lot of stuff on your mind, and I obviously can't cover every issue. So I'll be happy to answer any question. Thank you.
Regarding a question, I just want to follow up on your comment regarding Ms. Jenner. I don't know if you caught the interview that she had with Sean Hannity, but some of it seemed to make some sense. I don't know. Could she become a credible candidate?
It made sense because her handlers gave her the talking points. She's never before shown that she has an interest other than in passing a public policy. Never before. So what happens when you get a candidate like that, you give them talking points. And Jenner was good because Jenner has a background in the media over the years, knows how to deflect, and also knows how to stick to the talking points that are given to him. And so I didn't watch that. I didn't think it would be instructive as I've read stories about it. It was nice. And the good point was it brought new listeners to Sean Hannity, which was the real point of having Jenner on for that. There was nothing new there. There's no background or experience that Jenner has in government or public policy. Remember that book he wrote on the transportation problem of California or the education problem of California? He never wrote such a book. I bet he's never even read such a book. So I'm glad that he's running because it does bring some notoriety to this. It brings some flamboyancy to this, but we got to get down to the serious business. California is in trouble. And so, but his handlers were right. Now, Brad, let me point out, he just put out an ad that shows how terrible California is, juxtapositioned with him, Bruce Jenner, in the '76 Olympics, and how wonderful America and California was at that time. What's his position on transportation, on education, on healthcare, on taxation, and explain it? Instead, we saw a guy throwing a javelin. Nice, but it's your typical Hollywood type of campaign where they don't meet the issues and don't respond to the issues. Very surface type of interview with Sean Hannity.
Steve, thank you for alerting us to the pending legislation that would have allowed Newsom to identify each and every signature on the recall. The question today is, who is paying for the high-priced legal counsel for this recall defense? Is it we, the taxpayers, or somebody else?
Well, there is an anti-recall committee that has raised millions already to defend Newsom. So any of those legal battles are being paid for by that committee. That being said, some of the legal issues involved with the law are being paid for by the state taxpayers, but I don't believe that's a large sum. Most of that's being done by the anti-recall committee, and they are raising $50,000, $100,000 at a time. The state Democrat Party, on their own, raised and gave $500,000 to the anti-recall committee. Now, let me explain what that means. The California Republican Party gave $125,000 to the recall, none of it raised by the state party, all of it given to the state party by the RNC. I won't go into all the details. That's all the state party is given, $125,000 that it didn't raise. The Democrat Party had $500,000. On April 24th, the FPPC reports were due for the state parties. The California Republican Party reported $537,000 cash on hand. But part of that, because of the way the finance laws are written, part of that is money that belongs to the Assembly caucus and the Senate caucus for their campaigns. The state party has, in my guess, no more than $200,000 cash on hand. What that means is they have 1 month's worth of overhead they could pay for. Now, that's what the Republicans have. The Democrats, after giving $500,000 to the recall, only have $15.5 million left. Our party is broke, our caucuses are broke, and it's time to move on and do what we know what to do best. As I said in King City, it's time to ignore those who do nothing, and we need to do the voter registration. As Gina Gleason could tell you, how to do ballot harvesting without the help of the state party. Even though the state party took credit for what she did, I called her and said, Gina, I didn't know you were working with the CRP. Oh, I'm not. They didn't return my calls. We just did what we knew was right. And so let's just ignore those who aren't doing the job, and let's work with those and train new people, as I did last night down in the South Bay.
We got to.
Steve, I have 2 questions for you. I'm a volunteer with the Keep 9 amendment movement that's trying to move across the country to potentially get a amendment to the Constitution to state that the 9 justices are are what's part of the Constitution, and to make 9 a permanent number for Supreme Court justices. There's a group that I'm now a volunteer with, trying to garner support here in California for the Keep 9 Amendment. A gentleman by the name of Roman Buehler and a bunch of other conservatives across the country have been meeting for the last month to try to strategize on what and how to get a Keep 9 Amendment moving forward in the Congress and the Senate, so that we can prevent any court packing both now and in the future. And then the other question I have for you is any updates on Rick Grinnell and whether he would seriously become a candidate for governor here in California?
Well, let me answer your first question about my old acquaintance, Roman Buehler. You all know his brother, Luis.
Yes,
That's Luis's brother.
I got it.
I have never heard before anybody use the name Buehler in context with the word conservative.
Oh, okay. Well, he's advertising himself as such, and I don't know him that well.
So did Arnold Schwarzenegger. But I do know about the Keep 9 movement. I'm on their mailing list. It is a good activity. It energizes new people into the process. Unfortunately, to get a constitutional amendment passed, it first has to pass the Senate.
Oh, I know.
And getting those Democrats to vote for that is not going to happen. The important part of the Keep 9 movement is it advertises to the public why
Exactly.
we need to Keep 9.
What
And
the
that
issue is. Yes.
what the issue is, and that's extreme. That's the great benefit of what Roman and others are doing across
Yes.
the nation. It is a good effort. Second, in regard to Rick Grinnell, Rick Grinnell has made a determination, as best I could tell, that the recall is not going to be successful. So why run? And instead, allow the recall to exist, which it will, of course, and then have Cox and Faulkner kill themselves in the special election so that Grinnell becomes the Republican nominee for governor in 2022.
2022. Okay.
So as part of his goal, he formed a group called Fix California. One of the goals of Fix California is to help the educational choice initiative get on the ballot, which is
Yes.
great.
Yep.
The second, to do what the state party refuses to do.
What
And-
state party?
The,
They're
well,
non-existence.
yeah, I know. But there is a state party. The vice chair actually showed up claiming that he thinks that we had corruption and fraud when his own in the elections, when his own general counsel said there is no general fraud.
Yeah,
even
yeah,
with
yeah.
dead people. Anyway, so Grinnell is going to sue the state of California to get dead people from getting live ballots, and people who've moved out of the state from getting it.
So
Both-
you're gonna he's gonna try to get them to clean up the voter rolls? Is that what I hear you saying?
That's correct. And which is the responsibility of the California Republican Party, but who refuses to meet that responsibility. So while he's doing that, people like us are going to be watching Rick Grinnell saying, gee, he's doing a good job for the people of California, cleaning up the rolls, educational choice. And there was one other issue, I forget what it was that it was going into. And he's going to get a great deal of plaudits for doing that and support for doing that. I don't know if there's anybody on this call that would oppose cleaning up the voting rolls, or anybody that doesn't support the idea of educational choice. And so he's going to take a lead. And that's what a governor candidate should do, is take a lead.
Exactly.
And so that's what he's going to do. So that's my impression of what's happening. It's obvious he's not going to run this time. And when you look at the tea leaves as to why, it becomes very clear why would he start a group like Fix California, have a major fundraiser in Palm Springs that sold out? And let me define the phrase major. There are only two types of tickets to this event, and Wendy couldn't decide whether to get 2 tickets or 4 tickets. And the 2 tickets were either 10,000 or 25,000 apiece.
Oh,
No $50 tickets to this one.
yeah, obviously.
I don't even think the valet parking was $50.
Yeah,
But anyway, enough frivolity. But the tickets were 10,000 and 25,000.
do you know if Mark Muser is working with Rick? Because that was his campaign approach when he was running to clean up the state here during the last election.
No, I honestly
For
don't.
governor.
I don't know if he is. I do know, and I know Brad is on the call here, that Muser is going to be speaking to the King City Women's Federated in a couple of months, and I do know that Mark is traveling the state, giving speeches, as well as doing legal work on election integrity issues.
Yes.
So he is still considering running for Secretary
Yep.
of State again. And so he's doing all the right things, but directly working with Grinnell, I just don't know the answer to that.
And what about Constantine Roditis? He and Mark were the dynamic duo peddling across the state the last time.
Constantinos is now working as a board member for Reform California, which is Carl DeMaio's organization down in San Diego.
Yeah.
And I talked to Connie 2 months ago, and I guess it was 2 months ago, and he seems to be happy with what he's doing with Reform California. He's doing a lot of work with Carl on recall issues right now, which is a good thing.
Interesting. Can you say anything about Larry Elder?
I love the guy.
Yeah, in or out?
It disturbs me because Larry could be a great governor, in my opinion. He certainly is knowledgeable, he's articulate, and he's willing to stand up for what he believes. Okay? He doesn't want to run for governor. He isn't running for governor at this time. What happened was he gave a speech to 300 people at Calvary Chapel Church in Chino, Virginia. And during the middle of the speech, somebody asked the question, "You're running for governor?" And he gave an answer that seemed like he was going to run. Okay. By the time he got home, Facebook was filled with stories, Elder running for governor. Those 300 people went to social media and announced it. It was so big that the next day, Elder had to issue a denial. I am not running for governor. So the person behind it is a close friend of mine who is also a close friend of Larry's and has been working hard to get him into the race. He still has not said yes. But I do know I was contacted 2 nights ago by some people she had contacted up in Sacramento looking for a consultant to run Larry's campaign. Larry's not doing this. She's doing this as if he's running. And her goal is, well, everything is there. We had the whole team together. And in fact, she showed me a 8-page political plan that she drew up. And I had to correct her on a significant portion of it because she had me along with 2 other people listed as the chief consultants of Larry's campaign, one of whom lives in the state of Oregon and doesn't run campaigns at all, never did. And the other is an extremely close friend of mine who I went to junior high school with, was best man at my wedding and very politically attuned and had run campaigns. So I called him and said, "Arnie, are you running Larry's campaign? He says, no, I'm not running anybody's campaign. He's semi-retired now. Good friend. He still dabbles in politics and writes a lot. That's what he does, is write now. But so they had to take out all the people who were going to be the consultants, because none of us were going to be consultants to the campaign. So Larry's looking at it because Ginny keeps calling him, but I don't see him getting into the race.
Interesting.
It would be good if he did.
It would be.
It would solidify conservative support behind one candidate overnight.
Yes. Yeah. And I'd hate to see him go up against Grinnell in the next election, but
Larry has no interest in running for office.
yeah.
So it's not that he's going to go against Grinnell, because he's had lots of opportunities of running for governor or senator, and he just says, that's not me. And,
True.
Everybody has their own thing,
Mhm.
and his is communication, writing, talk shows, being a
Mhm.
pundit. That's what he likes to do.
Yeah. And he's really good at it.
Yes.
Okay, it was a simple question that I put into the chat. I was trying to get an idea of who actually is financing or who's behind Bruce Jenner, to get an idea of, the kind of impact that is being made by this invisible entity that you call his handlers.
Bruce Jenner. There's no
Correct.
other money. Now, an interesting sidelight to all of this. In 2 weeks, the new majority of Los Angeles is going to have Jenner speaking to them. Why is that important? The head of the new majority of Los Angeles is a guy by the name of Howard Hakes. Howard Hakes is a regional VP of the CRP who has donated to Kevin Faulconer. But if you have Jenner, you get a big crowd coming out just to see the show. That's what Jenner's going to do. You're going to see lots of people showing up just to see it. Not to support it, but just to see what it's all about. And some will come for nefarious reasons. Others will come for curiosity. I talked to just a lot of people around the state who are politically active. County chairs, CRP board members, people that lead organizations, both Republican ones and independent ones. I don't know of a single person active or involved in politics, except for those he's hired, like Harmeet Dillon, who support him. And so he's getting what he wants. He's back on the front pages. People are talking about him. And so he's getting his money's worth, I guess. He's certainly enjoying his life at this point for what he's doing. But there's no money behind him. And people like the people who he's hired, good, solid people, but the money is too good to turn down.
In your opinion, is it a vanity campaign?
Good phrase, a vanity campaign. I will now use that phrase.
It really is. Kind of sad. Do you think it's a vanity campaign for Cox and Faulconer, or do you think they're serious?
Cox and Faulconer are serious.
Okay.
They are very serious. I've had numerous conversations with John. He's explained a lot of stuff I can't talk about on a call like this, but he is very serious. He's focused. He knows what he's doing, and he just put in another $5 million to his own campaign. And again, if DJ asked the question, who's behind Cox? John Cox, his own money. Then you have Faulconer, who's going after the Schwarzenegger vote in the Republican Party. So, but he's serious. He believes in what he believes in, and he is working hard. to get support. He's traveling everywhere, and of course, also doing Zoom things all over. But no, Faulkner and Cox are very serious about what they're doing, not vanity in their part. Each believes they're capable of being governor of California.
Hey, why not? So does Gavin. I think he's
Well, he's
capable.
proven himself incapable.
That's very
He
true.
thought he was capable, but his actions say he's incapable. But he
Okay.
does have a great head of hair.
That he does, and a lot of hair gel. Okay, next question. If you were in Vegas, what odds would you put on the recall actually happening?
50-50. And let me explain. I believe it's 100% guaranteed that the recall is successful. That the first question, shall Gavin Newsom be recalled as governor of California? Yes or no? The yeses would win. If those who are promoting the recall go to those victims of Gavin Newsom as governor. Who are the victims? The parents of kids who didn't get an education, the people who go to church, that 35.9% of businesses that were forced closed, victims and potential victims of criminals, those who are concerned about the cost of illegal aliens. I just saw a story that he's looking at, Gavin Newsom is looking at giving full free health care at a cost of $2.8 billion a year to illegal aliens. But that's not true. Once you give free health care to illegal aliens, why would an illegal alien in Arizona and Nevada want to stay there when they could come here and get free health care along with all the other freebies California gives? It will become a magnet. So 2.8 is the ground floor of what it costs. We have no idea how high the penthouse is in that cost, just for the free health care to illegal immigrants. Then there's a push by, I wasn't going to talk about things Newsom was doing, but one of the things Newsom is doing is he wants to give a reimbursement for funeral expenses for illegal aliens who die of the virus.
Wow.
I mean, you can't make these things up. I mean, this is as bizarre as it comes. And that's how your money is being spent. That's who he cares about.
It would be so interesting to see how they just sit around a table somewhere dreaming up these idiot things to spend our money on.
Well, if they were Republicans sitting around that table, they would be drinking scotch and having beers and some wine. Democrats will be smoking pot and maybe something harder. Their brains are fried.
In the absence of questions here, I have plenty, but I'll focus on one. I liked what Steve was talking about with the idea of recall mania. And I wanted to have you talk more about that. Who's behind that? Is that an idea of yours, an original idea, or are there organizations or groups that are trying to accomplish something like that? And who would you target?
Actually, it is totally grassroots. In San Luis Obispo County, there's a school district called Lucia Mar. I'm doing a story about them. This week, they announced that people there are recalling 3 members of their school board. Up in Shasta County, the Republicans up there are doing a recall of 3 boards of supervisors who are Republican, who refuse to open up the county. Down in San Diego, the president of the city council of San Diego is a progressive by the name of Campbell. But it's not the Republicans that are recalling Campbell. It is progressives who don't think she's progressive enough, and they're going to have enough signatures. Then you have up in Oceanside or Carlsbad, you have a recall of a school board member. These are all, and Carl DeMaio is involved in that. Carl and I get lots of calls from people around the state. How do we do a recall? But this is not organized. There's no organization behind it. There's no one individual. People are fed up. And I call it, for lack of a better term, before you use the term for Jenner's race, a vanity race, I call all of these recalls recall mania, because they seem to be multiplying like a fungus all over the state. And people don't ask. Let me put it in a different way. In 1988, Pat Buchanan was running for president. He had no money whatsoever, but he had lots of supporters. And a reporter asked him, how do you communicate with your supporters? How do you tell them what to do? And his response was, I don't have to tell them what to do. They know what to do. In La Mesa or in Shasta or the 7 school districts in the Silicon Valley where there's going to be recalls, these people are doing it because they know what to do and they know what's right. And so there are some times that you don't need an organizer. The Tea Party movement was started because a guy named Santini was on CNBC, a reporter, saying what America needs, and this was in 2009, 2010, that time period. He said, what America needs is another Tea Party because of all the taxes. And it was a throwaway line in part of a report. Next thing you know, all over the country, people started Tea Parties. There was no organization. Yeah, Mary Beth Martin, Mark Meckler, and a few others became leaders of the Tea Party movement. But in the main, the Tea Party movement was local. That's what these recalls are. They're local. People doing, as Pat Buchanan would say, they know what the right thing is to do.
So you'd say maybe homegrown organic because it's in California, right?
It is the most organic political movement I have ever seen, is the recall movement next to the formation of the Tea Party movement.
Interesting. What do you think of convention of states?
It is a wonderful idea that's never going to happen. But again, just like the Keep 9, it's a good way for people to learn about the Constitution and to learn about our constitutional rights are, and to start asking questions of elected officials. How come you've taken them away from us? Technically, it could happen. Technically, realistically, it's not going to happen.
I was just wondering, in context of how are we ever going to straighten out our election laws? If they actually pass this HR 1, what are we going to do?
Well, they pass HR 1, you don't have to worry, go back watching reruns of Seinfeld. Why waste our time in a dictatorship?
Yeah.
Because that's what we'll have, is a total dictatorship. When dead people are allowed to vote, people from other states, this election for Congress is going to be so close here in the Silicon Valley. What we need to do, we have friends in Kansas. Let's get them to register to vote in California.
Yeah, why
Oh,
not?
they live in Kansas. So?
Hey, that works. Okay,
Yeah.
Last question. What have you heard about the Arizona audit?
Well, that's a great story. They are now refusing to turn over the server. I'm sorry, the hard drive to the server. It is so fraught with fraud. They are working so hard to hide the fraud. But one other thing that came to light yesterday, the Department of Justice under Biden is now interfering in that audit, trying to stop it on national security grounds.
I read that. I read the letter. It's actually, they say you're not supposed to touch these records for 22 months in case they need them for a recount.
And no one's touching them. They're looking at them.
Yeah,
They're different.
it's crazy.
So, it is so obvious that it was fraud and corruption in Arizona. You don't spend millions of dollars fighting it in the court system to stop the audit if you didn't have anything to hide. If you have nothing to hide, now there's good news, really good news. 2 nights ago, the San Luis Obispo Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance. Only get a absentee ballot if you ask for it. That takes away the dead.
Yeah, I saw that in your note today. That was really interesting.
And so that is a great move by the board. It sets a standard. Gee whiz, dead can't vote. You must be a racist, a misogynist, or a terrible person. You're a Trump supporter if you don't allow the dead to vote.
The dead, to me, it's obvious that the dead shouldn't vote, but what they really, really need to clean up is all of the non-citizens that are on the voter rolls.
So there have been requests made of the Secretary of State first, of Padilla. I don't know of Weber because she's been in only a month or so as Secretary of State. But Padilla had been asked to do an audit of the DMV registered voters, which would have caught a lot of the illegal aliens. He refused.
For obvious reasons.
Sure. I mean, if you're going to have corrupt system, you want to run the system and you can't let anybody see how corrupt it is.
Yeah. What she wanted to know is what's the next step for the recall and what can we do to keep this moving forward?
Between now and June 9th, the Newsom people have the right to go and ask people to take their signatures off the petition. Yesterday, Newsom made a statement that he's not going to do that. Anything until June 9th. After that, they have to go to the legislature for a pro forma statement as to how much it's going to cost Californians for the recall. Yesterday, I saw a story that the Democrats in Sacramento are saying the cost of the recall election is going to be $400 million. That's a lot of money. And what they're going to try to do is make it as expensive as possible. And that just going to say, hey, we shouldn't have done this, so vote against it because it costs too much to fix the state. How much did it cost us for kids not getting an education for 12 months? The criminals being released, but that's another story. Now they are talking about, last month we talked about the time frame, and we thought that it was going to be somewhere between September 15th and November 2nd as the latest. The Secretary of State has figured out a way to hold it off until the latest being November 30th, right after Thanksgiving. Again, the purpose is, well, you know, in a year, we're going to have another election anyway, so why get rid of the turkey? Oh, that's right. We had turkey a couple of days before on Thanksgiving. So that is, I'm now feeling they're really going to put it to us and wait to November 30th. And by the way, the question as to the 400,000 being, 400 million being presented to the legislature doesn't vote on that. It is just a notification of the cost. They don't have the right to say it's too expensive, therefore we won't do it. So don't worry about them saying, no, we can't have a recall because of the cost.
It just puts the number out there to blame Republicans for how much money is wasted.
Yeah.
That's a
And
shame.
it isn't a Republican recall. This is a people's recall.
Well, Newsom's trying to make it a Trumpster's recall.
Well, yeah.
Anyone that believes in Trump.
Number of signatures came in yesterday, 1.7 plus million.
They rejected 0.5% of the signatures in November.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Until they started this final phase, they had an 81 to 82% acceptance rate with a normal acceptance rate of 75%. And all of a sudden it went down. I don't know how that happened. I'm interested, but I'm moving on because we got what we wanted, the recall.
Just making it look bad. Thank you again, as always, for a wonderful Friday forum. We love it when you do this for us. Always
Okay.
educational, always entertaining.